Welcome to the American Citizens Abroad podcast. I'm Michelle, and today I'm chatting with Cepee. She is a Colombian-Iranian American from Texas who lives in Spain and is the brains behind the She Hit Refresh website, Facebook group, and podcast, a community dedicated to helping women over 30 move abroad. Welcome. Thanks for chatting with us today.
Hi, Michelle. Thank you so much. I'm very excited to be here.
We're excited to have you. Could you talk a bit about your life abroad? What made you want to move to Spain? And have you lived in any other countries?
Yes. So I guess let's start, with what made me want to move to Spain. So my love affair with Spain, as I like to say, started many, many moons ago when I actually first came to Europe in 1997. But Spain was not my first destination. It was the Netherlands. And that trip, I was 17 years old. So your audience can do the math there. And that's when I got bit by the travel bug. And I think even more so, it was the move abroad bug. I just felt like, oh my gosh, I want to live abroad. But I was 17, so it was not an option. But fast forward a little bit, 2001, I was in college doing another trip on my own abroad, and I came to Spain for the first time. And that's when I had that Goldilocks moment. If you've been to places around the world, there are just some places that feel right. And that's what Spain was for me at 21. But it didn't happen right away. And I tried and failed many times to make Spain work and did different stints in my 20s. And finally at 35, I decided to try again. And that's where I am now. I moved here in 2015 and have been here now for 9 years. And I just love it. Spain is a country that is very vibrant, warm weather in most of the country, at least the places I've lived. And I just really connected with the culture and this life of wanting to be social and be around people and be outdoors. And I think Madrid in particular, a city that never sleeps. And I was always drawn to that.
In your TED Talk, which is linked to in the show notes, you mentioned at the beginning how you see yourself as an immigrant rather than an expat. What is the difference between the two for you?
Great question. So I know that the immigrant expat wording, it's a loaded topic, right? People have very strong opinions about it. I'm actually someone who doesn't. So honestly, I see myself as just someone living abroad, I guess, a foreigner. But if I have to put a label to myself, I would call myself an immigrant because like you mentioned in my TED Talk, I talk about what we can learn about identity from immigrants. And my parents were immigrants to the US from Iran and Colombia. And I see myself as an immigrant here in Spain. Also a very different immigrant from my parents. My path has been very privileged. But I would say that I'm not offended or bothered if someone calls me an expat. I know for some people that something that they do not like. I'm okay with that. I think if I use the word expat, I'm really probably talking about expat groups or like English speaking foreigners here in Spain. And immigrants, like I said, I would just see that as like foreigners who are living here, like myself. I guess I would straddle both, right? But again, there's definitely a debate on the wording. I'm not too bothered by it, but I always like to acknowledge, I think a lot of people who have a problem being called an expat, they want to show that solidarity with other immigrants. And so they want to be called an immigrant. And I get that. But I think sometimes expat and immigrants, their move abroad is under very different circumstances. And I think from my parents' journey to the US and my journey here, very different. I came here in a very privileged position where I could kind of spin the globe and pick where I want to move to just because. And a lot of people, a lot of immigrants don't have that luxury that I have.
You speak about how you had to leave your homeland to figure out what you were supposed to be doing with your life. Could you touch on how living abroad helped you to figure that out?
That's what I touch on in my TED Talk of how immigrants really are like visionaries of their lives because they're able to do things abroad that they may not have been able to do in their home country. And I think that's really exactly what happened for me by moving to Spain. And I moved here again at 35. That was my last stint trying to make it work, and it's worked out. I had a certain lifestyle or identity in the US, and there were certain expectations that either society placed on me or community or family. That path of success, I think, is what I'm talking about here of you go to college, you get a good job, you climb the corporate ladder, you meet someone, you get married, have kids, buy a house, all that stuff. And I just never really felt comfortable trying to fit into that mold, but I really didn't know that there would be another path for me. I just thought that's what you do. You do what everybody says you need to do. But by moving abroad, really, I was given a greater freedom to choose who I wanted to be. And I think that is the real power of being able to uproot yourself and start anew somewhere else. It allowed me that opportunity to release myself from those expectations that were placed on me and those expectations that you internalize from being fed that narrative your whole life. It really allowed me to envision a different life for myself. And like I say in my TED Talk, allowed me to be someone else, somewhere else. And think that might allude to my business, but we can talk about that when we get there.
So, what inspired you to create a site for women over 30 who are looking to move abroad?
So this definitely came from my own journey. At the time, it wasn't a business. It was just a place to connect people. But this came from my own experience of moving abroad in my mid 30s and having a lot of my friends and peers and network ask me how I did it. Wasn't I too old or scared? Or what about my career and marriage? And they're projecting a lot of fears, but also had a lot of curiosity. And at the same time, I was meeting so many incredible women abroad here in Madrid where I was living that had made a move in their 30s, 40s, and beyond. And when I made that move at 35, I actually thought it was a little bit past my prime to be shaking my life up in this way. That move abroad is really something that I did in my 20s. It didn't work out, so I had to let the dream go. But I realized quickly that was not the case. And so She Hit Refresh actually started as a Facebook group. Started as a Facebook group to put the people together so they could help each other. And within 1 year, we had over 4,000 women in our Facebook group just through word of mouth. And from that, we started the blog, the podcast. We've done retreats, in-person meetups, online course, paid community, all kinds of things have grown from that. But it has just shown that there was this demographic out there that just wasn't being represented. And that's how I felt when I moved abroad and I was searching for information when I was 35. A lot of the information out there was for someone straight out of college or a gap year student, so in their early 20s, or someone who was at retirement age, who didn't have the same responsibilities that someone like me at 35 had in terms of my career and relationships to a certain extent, and tethers such as debt and those kind of things. Since I didn't find that information, when we started the Facebook group, we really noticed that this was a sector that needed information on how they could do it and how to untether their lives at this stage in their life.
Could you speak about how it's different for an American woman to hit refresh and move abroad than it is for an American man? Are there challenges that are unique to women? And are there common issues that come up in your She Hit Refresh Facebook group?
Yeah. So I think this is part of the inspiration too. When you ask, like a lot of people do ask me, why is She Hit Refresh just over 30, just for women? And I think there are definitely certain challenges that women of a certain age face. And that's why we have an age to our community here. But also it's just for women because there's a lot of information out there for men or sometimes in spaces that men dominate. And I don't want anyone to get offended. But and as a woman, we know this. Sometimes there's a lot of mansplaining. Some spaces may not feel safe for us. And so She Hit Refresh really is a space for women to be able to talk about the challenges that affect us when we're making these changes in our 30s, 40s, and beyond. And so how is it different? Well, as I mentioned, a lot of people had asked when I was moving abroad, I think questions that they maybe wouldn't be asking a man. So I still think in this day and age, even though we've come so far as women, there are still certain double standards that people may have. So whether that is in terms of safety, responsibilities, I think a lot of people question, like, how can I leave and who's going to take care of XYZ? I don't know that those same expectations would have been placed on a man. Questions about marriage and kids. I moved abroad child-free and unwed. And also questions about career. And so, of course, some of these questions men are being asked as well. It's just a different conversation when we have a safe space here for women to talk about these challenges. A lot of the issues that come up, I think not so much issues, but concerns is some women may feel like they are too old. You're never too old to make this move abroad, but society can make them feel that way, that by a certain age, they need to have certain things figured out. And if they don't, then they're not on a successful path. Making this choice to move abroad in your 30s, 40s, if you aren't married or don't have kids or maybe haven't bought a house, can feel like you are doing something wrong. We definitely use our space to normalize this idea that you're not crazy. It is not strange. It's not out of the ordinary. There's actually thousands of women your age who want to do this and have done this.
For some women who have thought about moving to another country, they've talked themselves out of it because they may be worried about money, finding a job, learning the language, being far from family and friends. Do you have any tips to get over some of these fears?
Number one, acknowledging that having the fear is normal. So you're not out of the ordinary if you are concerned about these challenges. And I think it's definitely normal and you should be concerned about these things because I never encourage someone to move abroad without a plan. So you do need to understand your money situation. Do you have enough savings? Where's the income going to come from? What kind of a job do you need to get? How do you need to maybe change your current work situation to find a job that you can do abroad? Being away from family and friends, all that kind of stuff. Those are things you need to understand and have a plan for. But I think some tips for getting over those fears is definitely to find community, because if we are isolated in our dream to move abroad, I mean, typically the women I'm working with, most of us, we just don't have a community where we're living that understands what we want to do, because a lot of people are living the conventional life, and that's fine. They don't understand because they don't have the same dream that you do. But when we're isolated, any fears we have can definitely multiply, because with anything that we keep inside, it just grows, it festers. And so I think having a community you can turn to talk about your fears not only lets you get it off your chest, but also lets you see things from a different perspective that, hey, okay, if you need to resolve your work situation, these are some options for you that work, right? You do not have to quit your job to teach English if you don't want to, if that's your fear, right? You can find a well-paying job and move abroad. Finding community is my number one tip for getting over fears, and to have a community you can turn to talk to see things from a different perspective.
For the ladies out there who are listening, what tips would you give them in regards to moving abroad alone?
I would definitely repeat what I said a few minutes ago. Number one, you are not crazy. So this is not a wild idea. You are not the only one. And I say that so that you know that you are not alone in this process or in these thoughts that you're having. There's definitely a whole community out here for you. Again, as I mentioned, find community online before you move. You don't need to move abroad and not know anybody. I think you can already start building community before you move abroad. There's incredible Facebook groups out there. Of course, there's ours, She Hit Refresh. But another one that I love is Girl Gone International, who has chapters in cities across the world. So if you want to move to Rome, you can join the Girl Gone International Rome chapter and already start connecting with other women who have moved abroad. So you're building community, you're getting answers to your questions. And then I think another tip that I would give people is to definitely do a scouting trip. So if you're moving abroad alone, I wouldn't encourage you to move abroad on a whim or move abroad somewhere sight unseen. I know that's not always the case, but if you can do a scouting trip, and a scouting trip just entails going to check out the place that you're thinking of moving to before you actually make that huge investment of time, money, and energy to make that move. Definitely plan a scouting trip, scope it out. And again, you can tap into community while you're on your scouting trip. But I think my biggest tip of advice for people moving alone is community, community, community.
And can you touch on the pros and cons of moving abroad in one's 30s, 40s, and 50s and later?
Yes, I love this question. Yes. A lot of people think, oh my God, I'm too old. I should have done this when I was younger. No, you are actually the perfect age to make this move abroad because you are more sure of yourself. Wisdom comes with age, right? It's not just what I think. That's a given out there. You make better decisions, right? You have gotten this far in life and have made so many incredible decisions that have got you here. And so you can kind of lean into that confidence that you know how to make good decisions. You are more knowledgeable. A lot of us have more money than we did when we were younger. And so that definitely helps out. And I think for a lot of people who are in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and beyond, for a lot of people, they have been working hard, have been on a certain trajectory, and you've been there and done that. You've done the conventional path. And so this is actually a perfect time to shake things up and try something different. And I will also say what I like to remind people is don't wait and let this dream sit on your shelf and let another 2, 5, 10 years pass, because right now is actually the youngest you're ever going to be. So if you think you are too old right now, well, just wait 5, 10 years. You're going to look back and think, oh my gosh, I wish I would have done it when I was 40, right? 10 years ago when I was still young, right? And you're still young no matter what age you are, but those are the perspective that we have in our mind. So I just want you to know this is the youngest you're ever going to be. So just get it together, make your plan, and make your move abroad.
How has living abroad changed you?
I think it's changed me in so many ways. I think the biggest one, and this is one that I think everybody experiences, is that you gain so much confidence from moving abroad and living abroad because you're constantly proving to yourself that you are capable. You're constantly participating in esteemable acts because you're navigating a whole new world on your own. By doing those esteemable acts, you really do build your self-esteem. And I think that is incredible. Me personally, is it's taken my life on a completely different path. I never wanted to be an entrepreneur. And I've said this in many places. I was actually a serial job hopper back in the US because I just never fit into the mold of having the 9 to 5 with the 2 week vacation kind of thing. It just really did suck my soul. And I really didn't think there was another path, but moving abroad allowed me to tap into different interests that I had. It gave me the space to do that. And like I had mentioned before, the freedom to see myself differently. And by being able to kind of play with my identity, I discovered all of these skills and gifts that I really wasn't aware of. And that led me down a very creative and entrepreneurial path. And I really think what I have created and built in my life in the last 8, 9 years probably would not have been possible in the US. I just don't think I would have made the same choices that I have abroad that I did in the US. And I'm very grateful for that because my life abroad has actually exceeded the dreams I had for myself when I moved here in 2015.
And knowing what you know now, would you have done anything differently during your journey as an immigrant?
Like many of us, we wish we would have done it sooner. I tried a lot of times in my 20s, but it didn't work out. So I don't know if I could have done it sooner, but I wish I would have. And something that I've been thinking about lately, it's never too late to do this, but I kind of wish I would have tried to live in different places. Like I've been in Spain for, like I said, 8, 9 years, kind of getting the itch to try a new place. But I wish I would have done that a little bit more, maybe in my 30s, do a little 6-monther in one country and then another here. So I wish I would have experienced more places around the world, but it's never too late. And maybe that's what I'll be doing in the years to come.
Any final thoughts you'd like to share?
If you are thinking of moving abroad and this has been an idea that has been visiting you and revisiting you for a while, I know there's people out there who've been thinking about this for 5, 10, even like multiple decades. I think you should really give life to that idea. That doesn't mean just get up and go. As I mentioned before, definitely have a plan, but you don't have that much to lose by allowing yourself to see what this pull, right, to a different part of the world is all about. We can always go back to where we came from. So if you go abroad and it's not what you thought it was going to be or you didn't enjoy it, you can always go back to where you're from. Many of the things that you're afraid of losing, you can always replace, right? Jobs, all of that can be replaced. So I encourage you to go seek it out. If you need any support, She Hit Refresh is here for you. You can find us on our website and on Facebook and our podcast as well.
Thanks for taking the time to chat with us today.
Thank you so much, Michelle. It was a pleasure being here.
The American Citizens Abroad podcast is a monthly podcast that is published the second Tuesday of each month. It is edited and produced by me, Michelle, and is a product of American Citizens Abroad. You can find us on Twitter at ACA_podcast, on Facebook at American Citizens Abroad Podcast, or you can email us at podcast@americansabroad.org. Remember, give us a good rating on Apple Podcasts so other Americans living abroad can find us.